Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to continue to have a look at the latest on the risk of cold and snowy conditions returning for many this upcoming working week. We're going to see cold air slowly moving from the north over the next few days. Weather fronts bump into that cold air off the Atlantic, and where those two areas do meet, we are likely to see some quite heavy snow in places this week into next weekend. Now, we have got a lot of uncertainty where that rain-snow line will be positioned. At the moment, most models have it across parts of northern England into southern Scotland. But for example, the ECMWF today brings it even into the Midlands, maybe into the borders of southern England potentially in the next few days. So very interesting pattern over the next sort of 5 days or so. But if you are in southern England, then it is looking quite unlikely we see anything majorly cold. However, this is sort of a two-stage process. We're going to see cold weather this week, but into the longer range, a lot of the runs are showing some quite persistent blocked conditions, higher pressure moving up towards Scandinavia, Iceland and Greenland. That does bring the risk of quite a prolonged cold and snowy spell during the middle to end of February. And we'll, of course, update you all on that as well. The short range, medium range and long range all looks pretty cold today. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, it is pretty mild at the moment. So we've got a lot of moisture around, and that's why it's very cloudy, and we have got areas of heavy rain moving into western and southern Scotland. Elsewhere, bits and bobs of drizzle, but nothing too major. But as I said, that's all going to change over the next couple of days as this weather front slips southwards. It is going to allow colder air to return for northern areas, and as I said, that brings the risk of snow during the middle to the second half of the week as we do see weather fronts bump into that colder air. Now at the moment, if we look at those 2 metre temperatures during the middle of the afternoon, it is pretty mild indeed. Look at that, real quite thick, bold yellows there, indicating temperatures into the low teens quite widely. So well above average for early February. But as I said, by the end of the week, some of these areas, especially for the north, are going to be flipping these temperatures. Could be 13, 14 degrees today. By Thursday, Friday, might only be 1 or 2. So turning a lot colder through this week. If you do look at the weather warnings, we still have this rain warning issued for western Scotland, and it does expire at 9 p.m. tomorrow. So still got quite a lot of heavy rain moving in, and it does start at 6 p.m. this evening. So even though we are seeing heavy rain moving in at the moment, it's not what the main warning is issued for. Now, it hasn't been updated since yesterday, so we won't go through it in too much detail, but again, 40 to 75 millimetres widely, maybe 120 to 170 millimetres in the wettest areas. So you could see a lot of heavy rain and a bit of flooding here, potentially. And by the end of the week, by Thursday, Friday, we could see a foot of snow in some of these areas. Very interesting indeed. So if you go over to the UKV and have a look at the next 5 days, you can see all that rain continuing to pile in over the next 24 hours, and that weather front slowly starting to drift southwards through Monday into Tuesday, slowly clearing across parts of England and Wales. It could get quite reinvigorated there. We could see some quite heavy, prolonged rain there for areas that haven't seen too much rain recently. A bit of a squall feature could exist in that as well, as it is a cold front sweeping through, and you can already see snow showers starting to come in for Scotland by 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Now, those wintry showers are just a bit of a starter for what could be arriving towards the latter part of the week. Could see some more prolonged snow potentially, with a few little features popping up within the flow. That could give a few centimetres there through Wednesday, but it's really when these weather fronts gathering in the southwest bump into that cold air. Now, as I said, we're expecting that rain-snow line to be across northern England into Scotland, and you can see here heavy snow starting to fall even in Northern Ireland here. It will mainly be further inland over moderate hills especially, because it will be very marginal indeed. The temperature contrast is going from sort of 11 or 12 degrees to 0 in the space of 10 or 15 miles or so in places. So huge contrast, which makes it very difficult to pinpoint the exact freezing level and the exact positioning of snow. But you can see the UKV, the general idea is for heavy snow across much of northern England, Northern Ireland, into Scotland, heavier rain to the south of that. As we head into the latter part of the week, you can see the overall pattern starting to shift. That low pressure moves out into the North Sea and it starts to open the wind in from the north. By the weekend, you can start to see this cold air will wrap back in. So, as I said, the next 5 days, mainly only cold, snowy conditions for northern England northwards, maybe the Midlands, as we'll see from the ECMWF run at the end of the video. But for areas further southwards, it is still going to be pretty mild. But that air is going to filter in slowly through the weekend into the start of the following week. That is in pretty good agreement at the moment. Just a good few days delayed compared to what we're seeing further northwards. You can see that cold air really dominating in the north. Huge temperature contrast, almost 20 degrees temperature contrast in places. We're getting up towards 6, 7, 8 degrees at 850 HPA in the south, -9 or -10 degrees further northwards. So that is going to fuel that precipitation, meaning the snow could be exceptionally heavy, but also it means it's going to be incredibly marginal in some of these border areas between the two air masses. If we do have a look at the snow depths, you can see that we could see substantial snow in places, but you can see that that snow could melt very quickly if that milder air does move in. So we will just have to see exactly how it does play out, but you can see here by Thursday afternoon, much of northern England and Scotland could have a good covering in some areas, especially over higher ground where it's likely to be all snow, no mixing or anything at all. Could see a good 10 to 20 centimetres at least, and there will be more rounds of snow into the following days from the looks of some of the longer range runs. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, some areas are going to be freezing this week, other areas are going to be incredibly mild. We could be in the same country this week with 15-degree temperature differences for the daytime highs. You can see at the moment, though, all areas are pretty mild, 12 or 13 degrees further southwards, and that will continue into tomorrow, where it still is pretty mild for all. Not quite as mild, but still 9 to 11 degrees. Into Tuesday, though, cold air starts to filter into the north, and by Tuesday afternoon, only low single digits or maybe below freezing across Scotland and northern England. Southern England, though, 10 to 12 degrees, showing you the recipe for the rest of the week. Into Wednesday, though, cold air filters in for all, and actually does get into southern England. It's just not able to hold on as that weather front approaches. Now, you can see colder air is in for many northern areas, widely down to -3, -4. So that's going to allow for quite a hard freeze, meaning the ground temperatures are likely to be very cold on the arrival of that precipitation. So even in some areas where the surface temperatures might be too warm, the 2 meter temperature is too warm, could see a risk of a bit of ice developing, some ice, freezing rain potentially there through Thursday. So that is one hazard to also keep a close eye on. You see by Wednesday afternoon, areas further southwards 4, 5, 6 degrees, so actually quite chilly, but it is getting milder as that weather front approaches. And you can see by Thursday, very cold in the north, but further southwards, look at that, 10 to 12 degrees, so pretty ridiculous temperature contrast there by Thursday afternoon. That continues into the early hours of Friday, where it is 7 or 8 degrees in the south, widely below freezing across northern England and Scotland, Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland there. As I said, though, this next 5 days, beyond that, we are looking like it's going to get quite a bit more widespread. Definitely looks like cold air will be moving in for all as we head into the weekend and start of next week, and potentially stay even for longer than that. It's just that it's in the longer range at the moment, so we can't have too much confidence, because of course things can change. But if you look at the latest GFS, no signs of anything cold at this stage, with the flat westerly coming in, but that quickly changes in the next couple of days. Cold air fills in from the north, and then low pressure approaches by Thursday, Friday, giving moisture, giving precipitation, and that means snow in the north. You can see the upper air temperatures where that dividing line occurs across northern England into Scotland. That's where we're going to see heavy snow. Further southwards, not much at all. Beyond that, though, as I said, into the weekend, we do see the cold air filter in for all. So we could even see some snow further southwards for a time as that colder air does push in. But at the moment, we're not expecting anything too crazy in the next 5, 6, 7 days. However, beyond that, look what happens. High pressure builds towards Scandinavia, and we do start to see some pretty cold easterly winds develop, and this would likely produce quite a bit of snow widely, or at least conditions conducive for snow. Of course, we can't predict the precipitation at this range. We could infer that it would be cold and it would be pretty snowy as well, with upper troughs developing within that flow. Beyond that, we do see a continuation of the block. The colder air masses don't actually filter in particularly well because the block is a little bit of a west-based NAO, but regardless, it's still a very cold, very blocked pattern. Again, we confirm the details nearer the time, but this is a recipe for very cold and potentially wintry conditions to continue through that middle point of February. So even though the next sort of week, if you are in southern England, you're not likely to see anything too crazy. Yes, some colder air can move in through the weekend. Yes, there could be a bit of snow with that, but not expecting anything too crazy. The longer range, though, definitely looking like the cold air and the snowy conditions could be a lot more widespread with that. Now, if you look at the latest GM, again, westerly winds in the next couple of days, eventually that cold air filters in, low pressure bumps into that cold air, has that rain snow line, very similar area, Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland there, eventually pulls away, cold air moves in for all, and then we do see a bit of a westerly return, but what you don't see is pressure is trying to build further northwards. So the GM is having a go, but definitely is probably on the more pessimistic side with any blocking at the longer range. Still pretty cold, wintry here, especially for the further northwards. And you can see here at day 10, Valentine's Day, we're in a cold northerly flow, so it could be a bit of wintriness around if you're doing anything on that day. But yes, high pressure is trying to reach to our north, not quite as strong though as the GFS or even the ECMWF, as we'll see in a minute. So GM a little bit pessimistic today. Definitely a scenario, but at this stage, a lot of runs are going quite a bit colder and quite a bit more blocked. Now, the ECMWF is incredibly interesting through today. Now, if we do remember what happened in the colder spell in January, we saw a very similar beginning to that cold spell. Where we did see cold air filter in and we saw these lows bumping into that cold air. Now initially, about 7 days out, which is the kind of time frame we're in now for this colder pattern, we did see the lows potentially pushing into Scotland, Northern England. And what happened? The low actually went through France. All that snow that we thought could have been across parts of England went into France and was hundreds of miles further south as than initially forecasted 5, 6, 7 days prior. So perhaps we're seeing that happen again because the ECMWF, as I said, has trended that low through Thursday and Friday quite a bit further southwards than the other runs. You can see here the cold air filters in for all, and look at the positioning of that low. It's not across Northern England and Scotland, it's across England and Wales. It's a much more strung out low pressure system, so it's not quite as concise as the other runs are making it out to be, but it's much further southwards, which does mean the snow would even get into the Midlands, maybe East Anglia, parts of Wales as well, eventually finishing the run with higher pressure building up to Iceland and Scandinavia. And look at that, pretty cold or even bitterly cold easterly winds coming in straight from Scandinavia. If we do put on those air masses and go back to the next week or so, you can see the cold air comes in for all, and look where that dividing line is between the cold air and the mild air. It's across the Midlands and parts of South Wales. So again, the ECMWF isn't bringing snow for the far south. M4 southwards, definitely nothing on the ECMWF. But it's that shift from pattern should be on the Scottish borders a day or two ago. Now most runs have it across Northern England. The UKV had it across Northern England. And now the ECMWF could be a trendsetter, bringing it even further southwards. So it is something we do need to watch. By no means where the battle line is drawn at the moment in terms of that cold and milder air split is guaranteed. It is likely to shift. It is likely to move around. The ECMWF is bringing it further southwards, bringing the risk of further pretty heavy snow across much of England and Wales here, and eventually does bring in cold air for all and wintriness for all. As you can see here, the east and the south are the coldest here by Valentine's Day. Look at that, widely below freezing. Now, if you do look at the latest precipitation charts for the ECMWF, again, don't take this too literally. We're not having a look at all the precipitation charts because we're still too far out to say with any sort of precision, really. But I just want to emphasise what could happen if that ECMWF run did come off. And you can see into the week, heavy rain clearing, and then actually that low arrives, and look, Midlands, Northern England getting absolutely caked in snow. I must emphasise, most of Southern England not seeing much. We see, though, repeated rounds of heavy snow that snow line dropping southwards, even getting into parts of the South Midlands, maybe even into South England, East Anglia there. Eventually that clears and we see heavier snow push in for all as we head through the subsequent days, with lots of snow showers pushing in as we head towards Valentine's Day. So incredibly interesting indeed, keeping us very cold and potentially very snowy in the longer range. And if we do have a look at those snow depths, you can see many areas seeing at least a covering, some seeing as high as 30, 40, 50 centimetres, especially over the higher ground where the risk of any mixing, the risk of that freezing level rising isn't going to affect the temperatures there. So that's why the higher ground is definitely well emphasised here, because it is going to be very marginal wherever you are because of the very high temperature contrasts at play. So it's going to be one we have to keep a very, very close eye on. Some areas are going to see a lot of snow with this. Unless this trends all the way into France, somewhere across the British Isles is going to see a lot of snow. Some areas are going to be 10 miles from the snow and going to see nothing. So that is just how this is going to play out, and it's going to be about pinpointing where we are going to see that significant wintry risks. As I said, Northern England, Scotland looking highly likely, Midlands looking possible, Southern England in at least in the next 5 or 6 days unlikely, but not impossible. As I said though, longer range definitely is looking more exciting for parts of England and Wales. You can see the next week looking pretty mild. When most of that precipitation moves in through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, initially with that weather front clearing, and then the next low approaching, it's mostly rain for London here. Big temperature drop-off is around the weekend, Sunday, Monday next week. And you can see we are cold, if not very cold, from a lot of the runs, average to below average for the foreseeable future for much of the rest of February here. Some milder runs appearing, but most are pretty cold. Again, that longer term is looking pretty encouraging for something cold and blocked, but not guaranteed because we still have a lot of uncertainty at that time frame. You can see the 2 metre temperatures are going to take a big tumble by the end of this week, but you can already see the huge disparity we have, which again does indicate it does indicate the issues that we are having with forecasting this. Dew points as well are going to take a massive drop below freezing by around Saturday time, which again will bring the risk of snow for southern areas. But I do want to emphasise, if we go further north as to Glasgow, the cold air is arriving within the next 48 to 72 hours and is hanging around for the next week or two. And you can see, if we have a look at the snow depth, we're going to see a lot of snow across much of Scotland here. Again, it's difficult to say exactly if we're going to see a lot of frontal snow, because that depends on the positioning of the lower pressure systems, but definitely a lot of convective snow is looking likely, and even to low-lying areas there could be a lot of snow indeed. If we do have a look at the ECMWF runs as well, if we do look at London, you can see the ECMWF operation was not too out of place, because remember, London wasn't in that cold air at all by sort of Thursday, Friday time, but it was on the periphery, right on the edge. You can see though some runs, maybe 5 or 6, do bring that cold air in a little bit earlier, and we are seeing the heavy precipitation. So that risk is there. However, it is unlikely for London at this stage, but is much more likely further northwards. For example, if we do put in Birmingham, as that was one area that did have heavy snow from the ECMWF, you can see the ECMWF operational run is that much colder than the other runs, giving heavy snow here. The GFS runs as well, nowhere near as much discrepancy. So ECMWF definitely suggesting the risk of that lower pressure system sliding southwards pretty early on. So we will have to see exactly how it does play out. It's definitely looking like there's going to be some cold and snow around over the next few days and over the next few weeks, potentially pretty widely. But at this stage, it is going to be extremely difficult to say exactly what will happen, because it will all be dependent on where the cold air meets that warm air, where that precipitation turns to snow. You can see even in the next sort of 3, 4, 5 days, we haven't pinpointed that low pressure system yet. So even though the longer range is looking even more encouraging, we can't really say anything with too much accuracy at this stage, because we can't even pinpoint the next 3 or 4 days. We've got no hope pinpointing the next week or two. But if you are looking forward to something cold and snowy, then if you are further northwards, you are going to have a higher chance, but the risk of something more widespread is definitely quite profound as well as we head through the rest of February. So just stay tuned, stay patient. The models will resolve in the next few days for this upcoming week, and then of course the next sort of week or two for the next few weeks. And it definitely is looking encouraging. So do, as I said, stay tuned, stay up to date with all the videos, and of course I'll keep you up to date with any weather warnings as well, as we are likely to see some warnings issued for later this week if what we're seeing on the models is correct. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.